Good afternoon, everyone. Uber is now the world's most successful and largest taxi company, and yet it owns absolutely no taxis. It's now looking to move into the food delivery business, and in New York City alone, with over 14,000 drivers, it would pose a threat to any logistics company out there. Facebook is the world's most popular media owner. It creates absolutely no content. Now it's starting to move into other areas, and it's in fact challenging SMS and telecom industries as well. With over 700 million monthly active users, it's expected that 38% decline will happen for telco in 2017. In 2010, the chief exec of Time Warner said, Netflix dominating the industry would be like the Albanian army taking over the world. Now, I don't know a huge amount about the Albanian army. However, what Netflix has done for many years is quite extraordinary. It's outrun Blockbuster, and it continually reinvents itself the whole time. It's now, of course, in the content production business as well. And that's similar to many tech companies who they're not happy to remain purely in their own industry, but they continually look to branch out into adjacent industries all the time. One of the reasons they're able to do this is because they provide essentially a thin layer on top of already existing industries. But that thin layer is where all of the opportunity and the consumers and the money exists. Life's too short to build something that nobody wants. That's fantastic advice, but it's only useful if you know what people want and you know how they want to consume those products. Technology adoption can be considered in the form of an S-curve. It attempts to describe how technology is adopted or practices and innovation is adopted through time. And several years ago, of course, the PC became very popular. It became the dominant technology. There's very few people in the room, I suspect, who's never owned a desktop machine or a laptop. And over the last few years, that's now been overtaken by mobile. I expect most of the people in the room will consider mobile-first approaches for development most of the time, if not all the time. But the thing with the S-curve is, whenever something is at the peak, there's always something else that's waiting, just ready to nip out and take the leadership position. Just now, it's difficult to tell what it is. It may well be a technology that we're aware of. It might be something new that we haven't even considered yet. But if we take a closer look at what successful organisations do, is they can ride along the peak of all the different technology highlights and make themselves successful over time. If we specifically drill down into one of those S-curves, you can split an S-curve essentially into two different sides. On one side, you have exploit, and that's where the majority of us in the technology industry spend our time. And we focus all our time on things like continuous delivery, continuous integration, agile approaches to development, because we focus continually on building better and faster. However, that doesn't always help us when what we really want to do is explore new opportunities and new innovations. It doesn't help us when we want to understand how will a consumer interact with something without taking a long time to go into build process and engage the organisation or the enterprise over a long period of time. And the significant challenge with the explore phase that you don't have so much with the exploit phase is that there are potentially many different things that could form the next S-curve. So, as I said, there could be any number of things among us just now, or things that we're simply unaware of that could provide the next big thing. Until it hits that inflection point, the point where things ramp up rapidly and it becomes a real trend, it's very difficult to know which thing that you want to put your money into. Now, as an organisation, if you put your resources into a particular technology or approach or trend in the market too soon, that could be quite devastating. You could run out of resource. And there's also the lost opportunity, because wherever you put your resources, you're not putting your key resources somewhere else. So what's preventing us in the enterprise from moving very quickly into identifying what the key things to explore are? Well, it all starts with an idea, probably from someone within the business. And that idea, on many occasions, will never even be shared, because people know that the daily operations that are going on in the enterprise, people don't have money and budget to be able to explore every opportunity, and deadlines are always hard, so people aren't able to invest the time that they want to. In some cases, people will share their ideas, but they probably won't go too far because your organisation may be quite risk-averse. It may fear investing the resources, like we saw in the previous slide, too early and missing other real opportunities, or perhaps not patching up specific tactical things that are relevant right in that moment. And over time, this starts to drive behaviour in the organisation, where people stop sharing their suggestions and they start offering up opportunities that they see in the marketplace. Now, on the rare occasion when an idea is recognised and it's spoken about and people decide to move forward, what you generally find in management is they then get into this upfront planning process. And I'm sure we're all very aware of that, where people decide how long it's going to take to deliver, exactly what it is you're going to deliver, how much it's going to cost, and you're probably unaware that this thing even exists at this point. It's impossible to predict accurately how well you can deliver and the conditions that you're going to be successful within at that point. But for some reason, if that goes through and it gets financed, then we all get involved and we progress into some kind of build phase. Now, we're starting immediately from a challenging position. We've already defined apparently what the value is going to be for the consumer. We've already defined apparently when we're going to deliver. And we've already defined, apparently, what the investment is going to be. And those three things together ultimately are the three levers for return on investment. If you want to improve return on investment for your organisation, you can deliver earlier, so you're making profit for a longer period of time. You can increase the value for the consumer, so more people are willing to purchase and spend more money. Or you can reduce the investment that it takes to build the thing. So we're already starting out from a very difficult position when everything's defined up front. But we're okay, because we're agile, we've got continuous delivery, we've got continuous integration going on. Everything will be fine. Other than the fact that IT agility in itself is useless unless it actually contributes towards business agility. And you can't achieve that without having organisational agility that's going to share a space with your IT agility and change the mindset from upfront planning to be able to move quickly and iteratively around consumer needs. So after a long time, hopefully you've handbrake turned in at the very end. You managed to launch, hopefully not delayed by too long. And at this point, we still don't know if the product or the service that's been created is actually going to be valuable and actually going to have the business impact that you wanted it to have at the beginning. So the learning comes very, very late in the process. Now, at this point, unfortunately, if you don't have an organisation that focuses on outcomes rather than outputs, you potentially have a project team that's been disbanded. Everyone's moved on to other things that need to focus on. So any of the learning that does come back into the product or the service at this stage isn't actually going to be acted upon. So it's taken many, many months, or in some unfortunate cases, years, to get to a point where you realise that the value is low, the investment was really high, and it hasn't had the impact that you wanted for the business. But we can't talk about that because people's careers are now on the line. So this whole end-to-end process takes an awful long time. And it doesn't help in an industry that's moving exceptionally fast, continually faster, with technology companies that are innovating absolutely all the time. So what we need to do is find ways of shortcutting the idea and learn process. If we're able to do that, then people can offer up their ideas really quickly, really easily, and they can get them invested in at the point when they want to invest in them, and only commission an IT build at the point when they're sure that it's going to have the impact that they want. Now, around a year ago, I started exploring this idea, and a book that came to my hands from a former colleague was Sprint, by this chap, Jeff Knapp. Jeff Knapp is a design partner at Google Ventures. And what he's done is he's come up with a process that allows you to go from a massive challenge for your business all the way through to user feedback within 5 days. And to get that user feedback in 5 days, of course, what needs to happen is you have to have something to put in front of the consumer. And the thing that we put in front of the consumer is a realistic prototype. So within 5 days, from a Monday to a Friday, you go from a massive problem, a really business-critical problem or challenge or consumer opportunity, all the way through to at least one realistic prototype with user feedback on that thing. Now, when you're able to move at that speed, that puts you in a really powerful position because you're then able to lower the cost of investigation so much and the risk of investigation so much that you can do this type of process on a regular basis. So people start to volunteer their ideas and become more creative and start offering up more innovative solutions. And from the business perspective, they can spread lots and lots of ideas and opportunities. They don't have to put all of the resources into a single opportunity at the cost of all the others. So this gives you the opportunity to try many different things until you find the thing that is the most business impact, and then invest all of your IT resource into that to follow through and deliver. So this 5-day process, what do you need? Well, to start with, you need a big challenge. You need a brand new proposition, or you need something that perhaps your organisation struggled to get over, an idea they've not quite got moving yet. But you need to start with that big challenge. Then you need a multidisciplinary team for a week. Now, that multidisciplinary team, it may have some technology people in there for obvious reasons, but it may have some finance people in there because they understand where the money comes from in the organisation. It may have people from marketing because they understand how the product is going to be marketed and put to the consumers. It may have subject matter experts. It may even have potential users of the system in there. But you need to have a multidisciplinary team for the duration of the week. And that second part, the duration of the week, can often be one of the most challenging things about this process because everybody has to clear out their diaries. Now, at the start of this, when I first started running design sprints, I struggled to see how I was going to convey the value of this process to the business in such a way that they were going to give up their whole week to go on this journey. But the reality is, to take months and months, or potentially years, to get to this level of feedback and condense it right down into a single week, I actually find many, many people in the business, all the way up to senior management and executive management level, clear out their diaries and come along for the full week. So it's quite exceptional. This is where I tend to start when we're going to run a design sprint. So we need to have a very clear idea of what problem is it that we want to explore. There needs to be a key business challenge, a problem statement, potentially a hypothesis. You could liken that to hypothesis-driven development, where you want to understand the business impact of the changes you've made from the very beginning. You need to know who the key stakeholders are that would want to be involved along the course of the week. There may be related insights that cause you to look into this. For example, you may have some market information on the success of voice UI, or AR, or artificial intelligence. You may have done some previous experiments, and it's worth feeding that into this challenge as well. Because just if something wasn't a good idea 6 months ago, doesn't mean it's not a good idea now when we're moving at such a pace. It makes sense as well to have an understanding of your potential audience and also any assumptions going into the process. So the 5 days, I'm going to take you through what happens on each of the days. It's a very, very rapid week. It never stops. And for that reason, we have to remain completely on time the whole time. One of the most important roles over the course of the week is the facilitation role. This is literally somebody who's in control of a big stopwatch and everything is happening in very small, bite-sized chunks. It's the only way we can move at the pace that we need to achieve what we want to achieve in the week. But on the Monday morning, 10 o'clock, we kick off. So it starts with introductions. Many people who are joining for the sprint may not be aware of each other's roles in the organisation or their purpose in the sprint. I ran one a couple of weeks ago where when we when we planned the sprint, we believed a particular sub-organisation within the enterprise owned that thing that was being explored. The day before the sprint started, we found out it was actually a different department altogether that would be funding the initiative. So day one, not everybody necessarily knows each other. We go through what's going to be achieved in the week and the fact that we will get to the point of consumer feedback. It's also important to note at that point that we're not making any design recommendations for the product or the service or whatever it is you want to test. What we're doing is getting something high enough quality to put in front of potential consumers and get realistic feedback from them. And then we set our long-term objective as well. Where do we want to go? Where do we want the business to be as a result of the work that we do? Then, again on the Monday morning, we move into mapping the problem space. So we go all the way from all the different potential touch points with consumers, right through to activity being achieved, and all the different parts that need to happen in between, either in an ambitious world or potentially within the organisation already. And of course, we then need to consider all the different customer segments. Who is going to be the consumer of this product, and who are we going to have to test with at the end of the week, potentially? Then we'll identify the key players and their goals within the organisation as well. Many different people have different motivations and different metrics and measures that they want to drive and head towards. So it's important at this stage to understand what does everybody want to get from this process. We stop for lunch, and then in the afternoon, we're right into Ask the Experts. Now, nobody coming along in the sprint for the week is going to have all the information that's needed to achieve the outcome. So what we do over the course of the week is we make sure experts, different subject matter experts on perhaps the product, on the consumer, on the organisation, are available either by telephone or for face-to-face interviews, so that at key moments they can inject the kind of insight that you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. We then, over the course of the day, we update the map. We ensure any feedback that comes from the experts gets fed into that overall problem space. And we make sure we capture any particular questions or any additional goals that come out of the questions as well. And as we go, we continually reframe the problems as opportunities, because one of these opportunities is the thing that you're going to want to explore by the end of the week. So we continually reframe. Finally, at the end of the day, and we're still only on Monday at this point, we pick the target. It's only at this point, when we're looking at the overall problem space, that we actually identify which key thing within the problem space is the challenge that we want to explore, essentially the riskiest assumption. So to do that, we need to organise all the opportunities that we've looked at and identify the target and make that very visual for the rest of the week. And then we're home. Tuesday, we're straight into sketching. Now, everybody who comes along in the sprint for the week isn't going to be an artist. I'm a terrible artist, but even I can sketch for that week as well. So the starting point for the Tuesday is to gather inspiration. And at this point, you want to go really, really wide. You want to diverge thinking as far as possible. So you'll look potentially at competitors' offerings. You'll list all the different solutions that you see from different competitors. You'll potentially look at solutions from out with the industry as well. Because quite often you'll find that different problems have been solved in different industries, and those learnings just need to be pulled in to the design sprint week so that you can put that into the process. And then we'll move into sketching the main ideas. Now, what's key about the week is it's important to have all of these different expertise and experiences and people together, especially to get the momentum and the excitement that you get in the room. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to work as a group collectively. It's well proven that brainstorming as an approach isn't very effective for generating the most successful ideas. It can often generate many ideas, but not necessarily successful ideas. So the multidisciplinary group are going to be in the room and working together, but individually, so they can get all the creativity out. So each person is going to be sketching different aspects of competitors' solutions, of other industry solutions, and even of their own ideas of what things could potentially be like. It's an intense morning, so we stop for lunch. And then in the afternoon, we're right back into further sketching. So at this point, we pull all of these ideas together and we start putting them up on the wall. There's many different interactive games that we use over the course of the week. One of the things that you often find in the organisation is the highest paid person's opinion quite often wins when you're deciding what we're going to build, what we're going to create, or what the best solution is. So the week is designed all around different games and different strategies and dot voting and so on that allow the good ideas to emerge up. Nobody gets an opportunity to sell their idea, because just because you're a good salesperson doesn't mean your idea is good. So there are many different games that are allowed to emerge as all these different personal notes and ideas start to go up on the wall. One of those games is known as Crazy 8. So for example, you have a piece of paper that you fold 3 times, so you end up with 8 different corners. And then within 5 minutes, so 40 seconds for each square, you have to rapidly sketch different potential solutions to a subset of your problem. Now, it sounds quite impossible, but what we find happens when we do those types of exercises is people really push themselves, really challenge themselves to come up with different ideas that they otherwise wouldn't explore. The types of ideas that would be shut down early in the idea stage in the traditional process. Still in the afternoon of the Tuesday, we start to look at drawing out full solutions. So now we know what problem space there is. We've seen many different potential ways of solving those problems, either individually or from competitors. And then we're able to mix and match and draw full sketches that we can put on the wall for further interrogation through different games. The final thing on the Tuesday is recruiting testers. Now, at this point, knowing the challenge, you'll know quite well who it is that you would really want to test the prototype that you're going to build with. Now, if you read Jeff's book, he advises that you can put advertisements on Craigslist and you'll get many people coming back. I find it very difficult to recruit people. I'm working in Sweden at the moment. Certainly very difficult in Sweden to recruit people quick enough for that week. What I have found, however, is a number of different agencies who are able to supply you people against different profiles that you provide. And the amount of time that we invested as a team in trying to find people would have cost much more and taken much more time than simply passing that out to an agency. So recruit testers is something that has to happen, but not necessarily something that the team should do. Either way, you are still going to have to write some kind of screener survey to make sure the right people are available on the Friday to test your product or service. And then, of course, if you're going to go down the manual route of doing this yourself, you need to reach out to your network and you need to look online to find people. Finally, it's important to remember later on in the week to follow up with the testers, because you don't want to pull senior executives with buying power into a room on a Friday to see consumer testing on the product you've created and the testers don't turn up. So Wednesday, we've been moving really fast. The Wednesday, though, is the first point where you actually make a decision about what you want to test on the Friday. So you're going to continue with individual games, dot voting and putting different things on the wall and mixing them around. And this is going to allow the best idea to emerge. These ideas, of course, will be reviewed together. And potentially, at this point, you'll find that either one key idea is coming out that you really want to test, or there's 2 or 3 different ideas that are really neck and neck. Now, it's perfectly reasonable with the approach that we take here and not taking a heavy tech approach to creating the prototype, to create multiple prototypes in the week and put them head to head, essentially pit them off against each other. We've done that many times, and it actually creates quite an exciting day on the Friday when you're testing. Finally, the decider makes a final decision. So the decider is another key role to come along over the course of the week. The facilitator keeps us on track, but the decider is a person who has the ability to make key decisions. Quite often that would be on the Monday and the Wednesday. We like it if the decider comes along for the full week, but if they can't make the full week, the Monday and the Wednesday are absolutely essential. But what they're deciding on the Wednesday is essentially which hypothesis is going to answer the challenge that you have. So you've come from a massive problem space down into a number of sub-challenges. One of those sub-challenges, you're going to come up with a hypothesis around how you can solve that. Now, the decider as a person has to be able to say, that is the hypothesis we want to prove or disprove this week. And framing it as a hypothesis is quite important. Again, being an experiment, it's important to recognise that whether it's successful or unsuccessful in terms of product, it's still learning for the organisation, and you still save many months or potentially years of building the wrong thing. We break for lunch, and then the Wednesday afternoon is the point where you start to create your storyboard. Now, it's really important for the Friday for user testing that you create a realistic experience for the people who you're testing with. And the storyboard is a key part of creating that interaction. You're going to have to create a script on the Thursday that backs up the prototype they've created, and the storyboard is a thing that allows you to follow through and tick off all the key points that you want to investigate. So to start with, you have to create an opening scene. So if your idea perhaps is a mobile phone app of some kind or a particular feature in there, then you want to start from what appears to be iTunes, because you want to mimic the entire environment. You probably don't even want to reveal exactly what it is you're testing with the end user. So you want to set the scene up front and then allow that to flow from that point. All of the sketches that you've done over the last few days aren't wasted, because all of those can now move into the storyboard to start making up the flow of things that you want to test. Any gaps between different areas in the storyboard, you fill them in, but you keep those details to a minimum. The key details you put in there is to allow the story to flow, but if they're not here at this point, that's probably because it's not something that you really want to test. It's not a key aspect of your hypothesis, so you don't want to flesh that out too far. Thursday is finally prototyping. Now, this is a key part of it for me. This is a thing that initially felt uncomfortable for me, because coming from a world where we're building and creating things all the time into a world where IT is nowhere near as important because you can create a realistic prototype in a single day, it starts to have you asking questions about your role in the organisation. But it's actually really fun and really quite powerful what you can create. So you start by selecting your prototype tools. Your tools for the prototype will depend really on what you need to test. If it's a website, for example, Keynote could be perfect. If it's a mobile phone app of some kind, it might be something like InVision. It could be that you're testing a service proposition, quite literally behind a counter in a store. You can create that scenario as well. It's really, really flexible. Assign prototyping roles. So the full team has come along over the course of the week. Some roles, as we mentioned already, the facilitator and the decider have come along. But on that Thursday, everybody will have a key role around creating the prototype. So whether that's creation of copy, hopefully much of the copy you'll already have, because the copy would have been a key part of creating your sketches. But it may be creating copy. It may be putting imaging and design into place so that it looks realistic. It could be working out the script and identifying all the different touch points along the way. It could be focusing on setting the scene. There are many different roles to create a realistic prototype. And then, of course, you have to start building. The interview script as well, of course, has to be created. And that has to... It's a particular skill in order to create that script, because you don't want to give away what you're looking to test, and you have to make the person who's the tester essentially feel very natural and comfortable. So it's worth having some specialist UX skills or someone with that type of background in the room to help with that. Break for lunch again, and then we continue with build in the afternoon. Finally, we're starting to stitch the prototype together before a final run-through at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We have to do a trial run because each of the user tests are probably going to last somewhere between 30 minutes and 45 minutes. It's quite a long time, and there may be really obvious things in your prototype that you've missed. So it's worth running through with a few people that even potentially haven't been part of the process. An opportunity to fix some final issues. And then, of course, you need to ensure that your testing setup is in place. Now, what we do for testing is we ideally have face-to-face tests. We can run them remotely if we're struggling to find people for testing. But we have face-to-face tests in a room. So you'll have the tester and the testee. And they'll be in front of, for example, if it was a phone app, they'll have a phone, or a screen if it's a website. However, there may be many other people who are going to be observing the testing. So they're going to be in another room somewhere else. We're going to transmit what's on the screen into that room. Now, obviously, the people who have come along over the course of the week, they're going to be in there and gather all the information and prove out their hypothesis or otherwise. But it's also a great opportunity to invite along senior management, executive teams, people who would be funding opportunities or interested in what next steps would be. On the Friday, we're finally at testing stage. We start a bit earlier, start at 9 o'clock on the Friday to make sure we're prepped. We need to make sure testing rooms and equipment are up and running, connections live, everyone's in place, script is looking good. Make sure that the video streaming is working for the observers. We also want to create a large testing grid on the wall in the observers room. And there you're going to have each of the people that you're testing with and each of the different aspects of the hypothesis that you want to test against. And all of the observers are going to gather loads of insight over the course of the day and put that in the wall. And these insights will all be gathered together at the end of the day to give you the direction for what the next steps would be. And then we progress into the interviews. So we're going to run 5 interviews over the course of the day. 5 is considered to be the lowest number of interviews you can run to be able to identify different trends. Those trends ultimately is what's going to help inform what the next steps would be. So the people observing, as they're watching all of the different 5 tests, are going to capture key quotes and key observations. In particular, people's reactions, because quite often what they say isn't necessarily going to be how they actually feel. All of those notes are going to be gathered together and added to the testing grid. We'll break for lunch and, of course, conclude interviews in the afternoon. The final wrap-up is the point where we get to look for any patterns that have emerged over the course of the day. And there always are. I was very sceptical myself to start with that 5 people would be able to give that level of insight. But you can see straight away if 3 or 4 people feel very strongly that they don't know what to do next or something isn't very intuitive, it's quite obvious that that is a trend. We, of course, review the goals of the week and review any outstanding questions that we still have. And then at that point, we need to decide what the next steps will be. Now, by definition of this process, it's difficult or impossible, in fact, to know what next steps would be at the start. If you're doing this, it's probably because it's an area of strategic importance for your business. It doesn't make sense to do this type of elaborate process for simple tactical things. You know, implement X. There's not much point in doing that. You can go ahead and do it straight away. But if it's strategically important or an emergent technology or a trend that you want to explore, then the value of that opportunity is going to be worth holding off to make sure you get the actual thing right and build the right thing. So by the end of the week, only at that point do you know this was a terrible idea. We're going to stop here. Actually, this was a really good idea, but there's some more questions that have emerged and we really want to answer them. So we're going to go and do a subsequent sprint. Or there could be any range of pivots potentially in there as well. Or possibly even you're confident enough now to go ahead and commission an IT build based on the consumer feedback that we've got. So in terms of planning, I've said that the design sprint lasts a week, but in reality it takes longer than that to get a successful design sprint. That's because at some point you need to identify a key thing that you want to explore, a key business challenge. It usually takes another week, I find, to get invites out to the key people. That includes identifying who the key people are and where they are in the organisation. Another week to set the scene and gather any expert input that needs to go into the process. And then, of course, the 4th week is the sprint itself. So although it is a 1-week intensive process, I generally find it takes about 4 weeks to organise effectively. Now, someone said to me a couple of weeks ago, we were looking at a sprint where, it was the same sprint I mentioned earlier, where we found out a day before that the wrong people were involved, or at least additional people should be involved. And they said that could have been an absolute disaster if the wrong people weren't in there at the very beginning. And the reality is, in the enterprise, that happens all the time. It's just that the point when you recognise it is usually 8 or 9 months down the line. And by that point, it's too costly and expensive to acknowledge properly, and things are going really off track. So to identify that at the very beginning of this process in itself, I would say, is a benefit. So what's the role of IT in this process? Well, first of all, in IT, you're probably one of the few areas of the organisation that understands the full digital portfolio. You probably know what marketing are building, what finance are doing, what products are under development. There aren't many parts of the organisation that's that depth of understanding of what's there. And for that reason, you can play a very important role in identifying key strategic areas and separating them out from the tactical deliverables, and also understanding where it relates to different departments within the organisation that would also want to be involved. And then, of course, there's the process over the course of the week. If you want to explore really experimental solutions, really innovative solutions, then IT's understanding of emergent technology, of course, is going to be really key as well. You could potentially offer some really good insights around voice UI or AR or any different range of technologies. I would caution that it's not the right time during a design sprint to get bogged down in what the existing IT infrastructure is like or the existing landscape is like in the organisation. What you really want to do over the course of this week is suspend reality and identify a where you want to be scenario. And if you start from a position of what's achievable, ultimately you're only going to end up with another version of what you already have. So coming back to the diagram we looked at initially, as an IT department or organisation or group, if you're able to shorten that period between idea and learning and change the organisational mindset to say, how can I test in 5 days? Then you'll start to see much more experimental and innovative things coming through the organisation. Of course, what that also means is you're going to then be building the right thing and not chasing around for months and months on end with difficult to define requirements and not fully understanding why we're chasing a particular deliverable, possibly not even knowing what the outcome is that you're trying to achieve. And then, of course, because we're removing potentially work from the process as well, because we're ensuring we're building the right thing, then we can focus on building better and faster because we've removed work in process. So coming up a level, ultimately, you get the opportunity to increase ideas through the organisation, become more experimental and get more people involved in that ideation process. You can then start experimenting more and again, moving into better execution. Thank you. Are there any questions? Hi. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. And I'm also in that scenario much of the time as well. I would say that this process is quite separate to the actual development process. So you can still, if you're working in that way, continue to work in that way, but use this as an opportunity to explore more experimental ideas that could potentially feed into other aspects of delivery, assuming you haven't locked down what needs to be delivered in that time frame. It may be that if you discover something of particular value and you're already locked down in your delivery and what you're doing, there may be value in starting a parallel stream or something. Be a good question.
Can you provide some example of ideas that were processed by this prototyping and some example?
Yeah, of course. So recently we worked on one where we wanted, I can't give very explicit details about the problem space for my client clients' reasons. But the particular thing we were looking at was, could we use Voice UI and Amazon Alexa in particular, and identify whether or not people find it comfortable and useful and able to support the business in the particular outcome that they were looking to achieve. In that case, we used a tool called HeySpring, which allows you essentially to mimic that behaviour. And for the user testing, we actually brought in an Amazon Alexa, left it in the corner, plugged in. Well, it appeared to be plugged into the person who was being tested with, and then the interaction was actually happening with this dummy system. So it sounded like an Alexa voice, and they were getting the feedback that allowed us to interpret how they behaved with that particular technology. But it was all faked in a single day. So yeah, would that be a good enough example? Thank you.
So my question is, so is there any criteria that qualifies those problems or opportunities for be sprinted? And because in the real world you can have those opportunities on daily basis, and do you build like a backlog of those items, and how do you process them?
That's a really good question. What I tend to look at, I think in the early stages when you first start experimenting, they're few enough that you can do it on an ad hoc basis. But as organisations start to get much more experimental, you do need to start managing almost a portfolio of experiments in the same way as you manage a technology or digital portfolio. So a way I would commonly tend to look at that is taking a three horizons approach, where Horizon 1, you're probably looking at immediate product and service innovation on your existing products and services. And about 70% of the experimentation should go into that space. Horizon 2 is more new products and new services, so more maybe a year to 2 years. I haven't used this in any way, shape or form for Horizon 3 business model innovation. And I think when you read online about it or follow Jeff and different people, there's different people who say it is more effective for things like product design than other things such as your physical spaces and so on. Jeff doesn't say that, however. His feeling is that you absolutely can use it for a wide range of things, including kind of physical interactions. And I think the example he gives in the book of that is they wanted to test out how people in hotels would feel about the concierge service being provided by a robot. So they actually hired out a room in a hotel, and they brought the testers in, which sounds a bit strange, but they came into the hotel room and they went through the process. Where would you put your bag, and where do you hang your clothes up? And okay, so imagine now you want to order some food. Where would you go to do that? So they picked up the phone, could order some food, and then when a phone call came back saying your service is now at the door, and when they opened the door, it was a small robot. And the interaction had then to happen with the robot. So they had small cameras, I believe, that was able to capture the kind of reactions and behaviours, and they tried different experiments about how human should the robot be. Should it, actually have a personality? Should it dance when it's happy? And so they do give examples of that being done. I haven't personally done that, though. Any other questions? Thank you very much.